Hi, I'm Ahava. Today, I am joined by my extremely smart friend, Matt Cyr, to talk about the now and future of AI. You've got questions, we've got answers. Let's get into it. So first of all, Matt, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. This is great.
I have heard you talk about the urgency gap that is going on right now for healthcare marketers around AI. Can you
Yeah.
describe the urgency gap? Because I think it's actually extremely important. I think people do feel paralyzed a little bit about what to do. So if you could describe it, and then can you also talk about some of the ways to manage what comes up because of that urgency gap?
Definitely. Yeah. So a few weeks ago, I was at HMPS and did a couple of talks, and it was really interesting because I had a number of folks come up to me after the talks and ask questions and just sort of get some advice on how they might proceed. But what didn't really happen very much was folks saying, hey, we really feel like we could use your help right now. Can we hire you to help us start implementing AI? Contrast that with a conference that I was at the next week in New York City, which is an agency-focused conference. All agencies of all different sizes getting together to look at the future of agency work and AI in particular. And after my talk there, I had 7 different agency representatives come up to me and ask if I could help them implement AI at their agencies to help deal with the future changes that are coming. And so that to me really sort of laid bare the urgency gap in healthcare marketing, which is that these smart marketers know that AI is happening. They know that it's important to start paying attention to start adopting in ways that are relevant to their business. But there is that reticence that you talked about. So I'm worried that I may invest time, energy, and money in something that doesn't pan out. But I also have a million other things on my plate. And this AI thing can feel so overwhelming and so big that it's sort of like, where do I even start? And I've got so many other things that I'm worried about. Why don't I just focus on those? I keep calling it the tomorrow problem. But that urgency gap really, to me, comes into play because folks know they're supposed to be thinking about and doing stuff, but that move to action is typically taking a little bit longer than in some other industries.
Is that really true?
It is true.
So I'm going to challenge you on that though, because I worked with 3 chatbots today. I read an article about how Apple Intelligence really made a big announcement and hasn't rolled out a lot of versions. Talked about how ChatGPT in your newsletter, which is a great newsletter, sign up for it.
Thank you.
Loopagency.ai. So you talked about how it's going to be connected to like Dropbox and, it's going to be ubiquitous and everywhere. And I'm like, and I'm a huge believer in AI. Like, I think it's amazing and it does incredible things, but there seems to be, talking about gaps, it's not just an urgency gap. There's also a gap between the promise of it and what it can actually deliver right now. And so I think some people are experimenting with it and saying, this is a really great thing for me to use right now. And I'll find out later if there's anything else that I can do. And that's kind of where we are as an agency. We found it to be incredibly helpful for our workflow. Even though we don't draft or create content with it, I've experimented with it for that. I keep trying to get to see if I can get it to give me what I need. Obviously, I'm always going to be biased and think a human writer and editor are better. But I don't know. I feel like, what are your thoughts around the promise of what it promises it can do and if it's really there right now?
So it depends on what part of it, right? So if you were to say, hey, Matt, let's talk about AI agents, I would tell you that the promise is way ahead of the reality, right?
Yes.
So
okay. That's why I had so many problems with all the chatbots.
Exactly. So if you like me, if you watch TV and you see McConaughey and Woody Harrelson on the Salesforce commercials, they are aggressively selling agents, right? Transformative agents. They're going to book your dinners and book your travel and whatever. The fact of the matter is that agents themselves, which are really autonomous and independent collections of AI, are not yet at the place where Matthew McConaughey would like you to believe that they are. There are certain things that
all right.
Exactly, but it's not there yet. The future of AI agents is definitely a promising one, but it's not there yet. And so I think Salesforce and others, and HubSpot is another one, have fallen into the trap of selling something that's not there. But if you take some of the other more general use cases for AI, I think we are very squarely there in a lot of ways that are quite powerful. For example, I was up at Maine Health up in Portland, Maine a couple of weeks ago, and I was doing for them an in-person AI workshop. And the goal of that workshop really is it's a few things. One is to help understand current adoption, attitudes, and usage, just so that we can have a sense of where we are as a team. But 2, it's really to sort of sensitize the team to some of the other ways that AI can be used. I tend to say that a lot of people are using AI today as if they are still Google, right? That it's very much a one-way street. I put something into the LLM, I get something back, and that's kind of the extent of my relationship. But the fundamental change of what's going on with AI right now is that it is, of course, now a two-way relationship where you're both benefiting from what it is giving you, but you're also prompting it to help you be even more successful. So one of the tools that I did a demo for the main health team of was ChatGPT's deep research tool. And you talked about the promise versus the reality. The reality of the deep research tool is quite impressive. All of the different LLMs have a version of it, but the ChatGPT version is the best. It allows you to really have a research partner and a thought partner, and giving it very clear, very deep prompts, and then asking it what other information it needs from you. It can, in the course of maybe 10 minutes, produce a 20 or 30 page research paper for you that goes deep in lots and lots of really compelling areas. And I have found, again, back to that tool itself, that it does a couple things very well. It shares a lot of more strategic thinking, if you will. I know it's not thinking, but it's providing more of a strategic direction than some of the other channels. But it is also showing you all the sources where it's drawing its information from, which is, I think, is really important. So if
it doesn't have that, you can't use it.
You can't use it.
You can't use it if you don't, especially because if you're a good human writer and editor and you protect healthcare communications, you have to go back to every single one of those sources and double check.
Absolutely.
So 100%. Yeah, but just to have that research done for you, it's like having a research assistant.
It is. Yeah. And when I was at HMPS, I had a young woman from Orlando Health who was asking about, hey, we're having a really hard time marketing to people in the villages. We can't seem to connect with them. And so in very short order, I created a research report for her that delved into very specific demographic information that would really help her identify personas and messaging that might really be successful for them. So those kind of tools, the reality is very much there. But what I like about what you said is that it's important, I think, for folks to take this with some of this stuff, maybe not with a grain of salt, but with a grain of cynicism, right? To say, like, is this really doing what it says it can do? Let me test it. Let me try it. Let me push its limits and see what it's capable of and what it's not.
Yeah. So I want to talk about a use case that I found really interesting because I think it's very applicable and it's very small and sort of unimportant, but actually I think really speaks to what the promise could be and how it's still 100% not there yet. So just hear me out.
Sure.
I've got a ton of stuff about prompt engineering, how to be a good prompt engineer, how to work with it, how to go back and edit your original prompt instead of just talking to it back and forth to really make sure you're getting the best possible output. So I'm a 49-year-old woman and I weightlift probably 4 times a week. I do bar, I do Pilates, I walk. And I'm tired a lot of the time. And so I asked it, like, here's my age, here's what I weigh, here's what I eat in a typical day. Here's some of the medications I'm on. When should I be exercising? How often should I be doing weightlifting? Like how often should I be walking? Like, can you set up a schedule for me that helps me do all of this?
Yeah.
And it brought me back like the best nutrition tips. Like I just ate almond butter and bananas because I'm going to work out later today. So I wanted to get that into my system, but it couldn't figure out the schedule. Like I would keep saying to it, like, well, Saturday's a rest day for me and I need a day like this. And then I looked at it. It's sitting here, weekly workout nutrition plan sitting right now. And I looked at it and I realized, you know what, Ahava, you need to go in and edit it for what you really want. It's never, I'm not going to say never, but it's rarely going to output on the first time what you really need it to do. And so what I loved about what it did for me is that it gave me the nutrition facts, which I didn't know. Like I could have gone to a blog post and read like, what do you eat before workout? What do you eat? But it gave that to me. Yeah. So that was great. It's like you said, strategic thinking. It surfaced something I didn't think I needed in there. I just told it what I ate. And then it said, well, you're not eating the right things before and after you work out. And it probably plagiarized those from a blog that one of my writers wrote. And then it set up the schedule, but it wasn't exactly what I needed it to be. So I can go in and copy and paste it. My question to you is why? Why can't I just say to it, give me what I want? Like sometimes I feel like I'm fighting to get what I want. And in all that time that I spent prompting and working back and forth with it, I really could have just set up my own schedule and been done. Like, I think I probably spent an hour more working with it to try to get it to give me what I wanted than I could have if I had just said to myself, okay, on Monday, you're going to do this. On Tuesday, you're going to do.
Yep. So a couple things. One, I would say these models are changing so quickly and in ways that are both subtle and not subtle, right? A few weeks ago, OpenAI had to actually roll back one of their ChatGPT versions because you may have even seen it. It had become this sort of sycophantic yes person who was just making everybody feel really good about themselves,
I
but it was not really being helpful, right? And so they said,
know.
the weights in the
As
model.
psychophantic people are often not helpful.
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
And that's the joy of me.
That's the joy of you. But they had to roll it back. And they said, we rolled it out maybe a little too early. Part of what you're seeing is that these companies, particularly OpenAI, are rolling out these models in real time with the goal of learning, breaking, trying, fixing, because they want to be seeing how they act in the wild. So they're not going to always be perfect.
Is that responsible?
So it depends on your point of view. I personally, I think there's value in doing it that way, as long as you're protecting people's data and are doing it in ways that are
And
not.
also you're informing them. Like one of
Yeah.
the chatbots I was
Yep.
working with today said, I'm still learning. So if the more
Yep.
questions you ask me, the more I'm going to learn. And I kept asking it the question in different ways, and it kept giving me the same answer. I'm still learning. So
Yes.
finally I was like, I don't think you're learning anything. So I'm gonna move on.
You know, so you actually, and you can ask the model to fix itself. You can be very direct with the model and say, look, you're not doing what I need you to do. Why are you not doing it? And I need you to fix it. And it will
I've
do.
done it with those. I've done it with other things. And sometimes it will give me, back again what I want. I mean, I think my
Yep.
experimentation with AI in the beginning was really around content creation.
Yep.
As I experimented with it, and I always say the same thing to everybody. I'm like, the first draft you get, you start reading it, you're like, wow, this is magic. And then you start reading it and you realize,
Right.
okay, this isn't really what I was looking for. But once I switched gears and I was like, okay, I'm not going to use this for this. What am I really going to use it for? And that was workflow and research
Yep.
assistance and SEO and all that kind of stuff. I really, really enjoyed working with it. But
Yep.
I do think sometimes like I always joke around about I created Ahava GPT, and like in the beginning she was like an annoying toddler that like I just couldn't get her to do what I needed her to do. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And now she's kind of like a 21-year-old. So like she's really smart and she knows what she needs to do, but every once in a while I'm like, wow, you're still really dumb. So no offense to any 21-year-olds out there.
But I think that gets back to what your question was a minute ago, which is around, why are they in some cases not as good as they need to be? I always describe or often describe these large language models as junior employees or interns, right?
Yes.
And yes, there's going to be time that you're going to be putting into training the model so it learns what you want out of it and what kinds of responses it should be giving you and all of that. And it does take time. But I tend to find that if you had a junior employee, you would be doing the same thing, right? You'd be spending time mentoring that person, helping them get better at what they're doing, learn how to be professional, all that kind of good stuff. But it takes some time and it takes some doing. And I think there is a little bit back to that urgency. I do think there's this idea of like, if it's not perfect the first time I do it, I'm going to throw my hands up and we're going to be done. But I think it will take some time and then you can really start to see the benefit from it. I see that in my own work with my own Matt GPT, right? That it really does take some time, but it eventually becomes something that can really add value.
Matt, we have a letter from a reader. You ready?
Oh, real-time reader. Love it.
All right. Dear Ahava,
Oh,
we have people fully engaged in AI adoption, but we also have people not touching it yet at all.
yeah.
We're living in this middle ground, and there's a huge range of adoption and also resistance. Any ideas on how to handle this?
Yeah, I love that. Such a good question. So that is what I call the messy middle. We are living very much, I think, in this crazy moment right now where we have exactly that, right? We have folks who are not touching it either because they're feeling overwhelmed or intimidated by it, or because they're like, this is not something I want to be a part of. I'm a writer, I'm a designer. I don't want the technology doing this for me. But then, of course, you have the other end of that spectrum, which is where folks are really fully embracing it and using it in lots of very deep ways. But I think the majority of people are in that messy middle, right? Which is like, okay, we get that there's some potential benefit here. It's not going to be the be all, save all, end all. But like, what is that place for me that's going to make sense? And so going back to the conversation of the Maine health trip that I took a couple weeks ago, whenever I go and do one of these on sites, I do a survey in advance and I ask people about their adoption of AI, their attitudes about it, their usage of it. And it's super eye opening because it lets me walk in the room with an understanding of the types of attitudes folks have, right? And in this case, as in with every other case, when I've done things like this, you have folks who are like, this is amazing. I can't wait to use this. I'm using it all the time. But we also had responses. There was somebody who said, and this is, I think, a quote, they said, I feel powerless in the face of this, that it's just going to happen to me and I just got to get on board and there's nothing I can do about it. And for me, it's super disheartening, right? Because that is not at all what I want folks to be thinking of when they think of this. I want it to feel like something that they can embrace and can make sense to them. And so the reader's question around what can we do I think there's a number of things we can do. The first thing that we can do is to get into a room together, like I did in Maine, and just start having these conversations and let people express their concerns and their fears and their excitement. Somebody spoke up in the middle of this session and just said, part of the challenge with AI is that it's starting to be really good at things that people do for, in their free time for fun, like writing or creating artwork. And so it really feels like it's sort of, impinging on our territory. And that makes total sense, right? So I think it's allowing people to speak and say, I don't feel good about this. I'm worried it's going to take my job. I'm worried that I'm not going to keep up. But then start to have the conversation about where are some ways that we can do this that are maybe small, that are maybe incremental, that are super focused, that can show some benefit without having to do everything all at once.
Just like everything in the hospital marketing world, and I would say
100%.
in every industry, right? Pilot it up, like find a
Exactly.
small use case, get people on board, let them see the transformative power of it, and then get them started on it.
Exactly.
I think that's great. I love that messy middle. That's a great way to think about it. And I see myself in there also. Like I think I'm somewhere around like 5, 6. I use it every day. I'm really comfortable with it. I know where I'm going to use it for different things. But then there are like, I know I could get more sophisticated with it, and I just need to spend the time learning how to do that. And I'm actually getting ready to do that with a workflow thing. I'm going to work with make.com and try to figure out how to get it to do something for me,
Cool.
automate a workflow. But it takes time, and it's learning a new skill that also sometimes makes me feel frustrated because I'm like, well, will I really get what I want from it? Because I don't always get what I want from it now, and I'm using it in a very basic way for those particular use cases.
Sure.
Understand.
Yep.
And I think thinking of it as a junior employee or an intern is a really smart thing to do.
Yeah, just the expectation, right? Like,
Yes.
okay, this
Yes.
isn't going to be perfect the second I get it.
Right.
I'm going to have to work with it. I'm going to have to tell it a little bit more about what I need from it. So I find it's a nice way to approach it.
Yeah. I love the way Andy Crestodino talks about it. He says AI stands for average intelligence.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to ask you about the elephant in the room that I think is very actually elephant in, like, I think we've been talking about it since day one, but on Friday, somebody in the government asked AI to shut itself down from doing something it wasn't supposed to be doing, and the AI would not shut itself down.
Yeah.
What's your take on that stuff? Because I think we're running into, and I think from the very beginning, it was the Terminator. I've seen Terminator, Skynet become self-aware in 2029. We're in 2025. Like, is that where we're hurtling towards? And, I saw War Games. I mean,
Right.
to start a nuclear war.
Right. Yeah.
What's your take on that? Especially because earlier in this conversation, you said to me, yeah, well, they're deploying it and seeing it in real time, move fast and break things. Well, is the
Yep.
thing going to be the human race or the planet?
Here's the thing is I don't think we really know exactly what the end game is for all of this. I don't think there's any way in some cases to know that. The fact is, for some of these companies, a lot of this stuff is they're learning as they go as well. Like if you listen to some of the senior folks in this space, they're trying to figure some of this out as we go. The thing that I try to lean back on is that there are, at least in public statements and missions and all of that, a very strong, consistent, particularly among the US-based LLMs and companies, belief that there needs to be guardrails in place, belief that there needs to be testing, belief that there needs to be a human element at the center of all of this so that we can be testing and finding places where the AI is going to be doing things that we don't want it to, but there's still ways for us to have control over that. Now, is that a false sense of control? I don't know. But I do think that there are good people who are trying to put realistic limitations. I don't know if how closely you follow this stuff. I'm kind of a nerd for this news, but a few weeks ago, OpenAI came out and said that they were no longer going to be trying to become a for-profit company. For the last several years, they've been saying they want to become a for-profit. There's been a lot of pushback about, no, you started as a not-for-profit with a mission. And they just conceded that, in fact, they needed to stay a not-for-profit, which has great implications, right? We work in healthcare. We know what the value is of not-for-profits. And so I'm hopeful that that kind of thing will continue to put pressure on these companies to stay in safe places with this technology.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm incredibly cynical, and I'm a student of critical theory and capitalism, and I just think you're just looking at a potentially dangerous technology. We've done this already a few times. We did it with nuclear power, and we've done it with social media that I think has destroyed a generation of children. And I think now we're doing it with AI, and it's like, clearly we don't deserve whatever it is because we just keep making the same mistake. We unleash these technologies and then we're like, oh, maybe we should put that horse back in the barn. So, and there are a lot of people who would say to me, well, you're way too risk averse. Like, so what? So get a new technology going and then figure out how to manage it, but tell it to the people in Chernobyl, so it's very, I hear where you're coming from, and I think that you're closer to it. So I hope your positivity is correct. I just know that I was here when social media started, and it seemed like this really great thing. And it very quickly became toxic. And then it became a power to, split and polarize hundreds of people. That's something that we should be appalled by. And we should say, we're not going to allow ourselves to be manipulated this way. And here we are doing it all over again.
I hope there'll be some lessons learned from the social media age for sure.
I hope so also. I mean, that's one of the things that I've talked to my kids about with responsible AI use, and I think that for me, it's the Prometheus myth. Why did, you stole fire from the gods? What did you think was going to happen? Well, okay, we do a lot of really amazing things with fire. Like, wow, look at what we've done with fire. We also burn shit down sometimes. So you gotta just be careful with it. And I don't want to come across as a Debbie Downer. This is more of like an ethical part of the conversation around AI. To me, this is separate from the healthcare marketing, because I don't really think healthcare marketers can blow up the world using AI. I do think for myself, when I think about, the larger implications, I think 100% what you said is 100% correct. Nobody knows what's going to happen. Nobody knows what the end game is. But on the other hand, you are putting a lot of trust in these people who have already misbehaved. And so do we really trust people who have already sort of done and said things that make us go, do you really care about being for profit, or do you just not want people breathing down your back right now? And 2 years from now, all of a sudden you're going to be for profit again. So that's where my cynical brain comes through. And I hope that they are good stewards, and I hope that they do the right thing, because they really are playing with fire.
Yeah. And I think, one of the big reasons that I got into why I started my company last year, and one of the things that really drives me is, and the reason the company is called Loop, is that I believe very strongly that AI can have a positive impact, but only if humans are in the loop, right? And that if you are, right, if you're engaged and you're involved in how this is being used and brought into society, is it being brought in equitably? Is everyone being given the opportunity to benefit from these technologies or not? Right? Are we making smart decisions to protect humanity or not? Are we allowing people to have dangerous relationships, emotional relationships with technologies or not? I think to me, I don't want to be the sort of going back to the main health survey, the person saying, I feel powerless and this is happening, I just got to get on board. I don't want to say that I feel like this is just happening and it's, everybody's just got to figure it out. But I do feel like there is a responsibility that we each have to figure out what this can look like for us as individuals and as a society going forward, and helping shape it into something, right? People say, oh, I keep reading these stats about AI is going to take everybody's jobs, and, what are we going to do? And I always say, like, when tractors were invented, farming didn't go away. We just found new ways, to find passion in our work and in our lives. And so I would just encourage all the healthcare marketers out there to see this as an opportunity to help shape, what does the future of what we do look like? How do we give people the opportunity to do the stuff they love? You're a writer, I'm a writer. I started my career as a writer and editor. I love writing. And I don't think these tools are better than us at this. So I think about, what can the AI do?
But they can save time writing an email.
They can save time, right? So why don't we let the AI do what it's best?
Exactly.
So that we can do what we love most, right?
Yeah.
We want to tell amazing patient stories all day long. Let the AI do all the repetitive nonsense so that we can be freed up as creative people.
100%. I always think about, I'm a big fan of the TV series The Crown. And if you watch the first season of The Crown, you see that in the palace, the telephone operators were switching out the calls to get them to the different rooms so that the queen could answer the phone, like somebody would say to her, your majesty, whatever, whoever's on the phone. And I always looked at that scene and thought to myself, well, there it is, right? Like, okay, so they figured out automatic telephone switching. Those people had to train and get new jobs. But if you look at like the industry, telephony and like electronics and what happened and the explosion, and like now those people work at the Apple store, like whatever it is, they figured out a way to transfer those skills. So I'm not worried about, replacing. I think that there's always going to be room. And I think that there are things that we do now that we don't have to do, that hopefully AI will replace. Somebody said to me, like, do you think content is going to go away? And I'm like, well, I don't know. There's 10,000-year-old cave paintings that everybody's going to, like, dying to go to see. Like, that's content.
Yes, it is content. Yes. Yeah, content is not going away. I keep saying to people, creativity and strategy are only
even more important. And content is more important, because that's one of the things that frustrates me about this whole like conversation around websites are dead, if you don't feed it the information, it's not going to have any information to regurgitate to the people
Right,
asking for
right.
it. So it's just funny how like that works. Like, I don't know why content's always the ugly stepsister, but maybe that's not really true. Maybe that's just because I talk about it all day. Matt, where can people find you?
Loopagency.ai is my website. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm there quite a lot, as you know.
With great stuff. He always shares
thank you.
really valuable information. So
Cool. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Yeah, no, so that's it. And reach out, and would love to connect with folks if they have questions.
awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This has been fun. A little deeper than I was thinking, Ahava.
Well, it always is with me, right? And thank you to our viewers for joining in. I hope you got the answer you needed today. If not, email me at ahava.leavetag@ahamediagroup.com. We will see you next time. Thank you.